Welcome to Monk's Temple. Before we begin anything, let us first arrive. Not just physically, but completely. If you are able, find a comfortable position where you can be still for a while. It doesn't matter if you are sitting, lying down, or simply resting your eyes while going about your day. What matters is that you give yourself permission to be here, right now, in this moment. Take a breath. A long, slow, deep breath. Let the air fill your lungs completely, and then release it gently, as if you are letting go of something you no longer need to carry. Another breath. Feel the slight shift in your body as you relax. You are here. You are present. And in this presence, there is already a small seed of peace. There is something fascinating about how the human mind works. Psychologists have studied for decades what they call the negativity bias. It is the brain's tendency to register negative events more deeply and remember them more vividly than positive ones. From an evolutionary standpoint, this made perfect sense. Our ancestors needed to remember which berry made them sick, which predator lurked in which cave, which path led to danger. Forgetting a positive experience might mean missing out on a nice view. Forgetting a negative experience could mean death. So the brain became wired to hold on to the difficult, the painful, the threatening. And here we are, thousands of years later, walking around with these ancient brains, still holding on to every criticism, every failure, every moment of pain, as if our survival depends on it. The problem is, in the modern world, this wiring often works against us. It keeps us trapped in cycles of anxiety and self-doubt. It makes the temporary feel permanent. It makes the difficult feel unsurvivable. This is where the wisdom of Buddhism enters like a gentle light into a dark room. The Buddha, sitting under the Bodhi tree more than 2,500 years ago, was concerned with something far more fundamental, the nature of suffering itself. He observed that human beings suffer not because life is inherently bad, but because we cling. We cling to what we want. We cling to what we fear losing. We cling to our ideas of how things should be. And when reality does not match our clinging, we suffer. The Buddha's entire teaching can be summarized in one simple but profound statement: suffering arises from attachment, and freedom from suffering is possible. Not by changing the world, but by changing our relationship to it. Let us sit with that for a moment. Freedom is possible. Not in some distant future, not after you achieve all your goals, not when your problems finally disappear. Right now, in the middle of your difficult feelings, in the middle of your uncertainty, in the middle of your pain, freedom is possible. Not freedom from the situation, but freedom within it. Think of your mind as the sky. Vast, open, infinite. Thoughts and feelings are like weather patterns passing through this sky. Sometimes there are dark clouds. Sometimes there are storms. Sometimes there is sunshine and clear blue. But here is the essential truth. The sky is never damaged by the weather. The storm does not leave a scar on the sky. The clouds do not permanently stain it. The sky remains what it has always been, open, vast, and untouched. Your awareness is that sky. Your thoughts and feelings are just the weather. And you have forgotten this. You have become so identified with the storm that you believe you are the storm. But you are not. You are the sky that holds it. I want to share a story with you about this very distinction. There was once a woman named Priya who lived in a bustling city. She was a graphic designer, talented and hardworking, but she carried within her a deep well of anxiety. It had been with her since childhood, this feeling that something terrible was about to happen. She managed it well enough most days, but sometimes the anxiety would swell up like a wave and crash over her, leaving her breathless and paralyzed. She tried therapy, medication, meditation apps, self-help books. Some things helped a little, but the anxiety always returned. One day, Priya decided to take a weekend trip to a small mountain town. She rented a cabin and planned to just walk in the woods. On her second day, she was hiking when a sudden storm rolled in. The sky turned dark, thunder rumbled, and rain began to pour. She took shelter under a large rock overhang and watched the storm rage. Wind whipped the trees. Rain fell so hard it created small rivers on the trail. Priya sat there, wet and cold, watching this display of nature's power. And then, as quickly as it had come, the storm passed. The clouds broke apart. Sunlight streamed through. The forest sparkled with water droplets. She stepped out and continued her hike. As she walked, she had a realization. The storm had been powerful and overwhelming. But the forest was still there. The trees were still standing. The mountain had not been destroyed. It had simply been rained on. She thought of her anxiety. What if it was just weather? What if her mind was the mountain, and the anxiety was just a storm passing through? What if she could simply let it rain, knowing that the sun would eventually come out, knowing that the mountain would still be there? Priya returned to the city with a different relationship to her anxiety. When the waves came, she didn't panic. She didn't try to push them away. She sat with them, observing, allowing. She would say to herself, "Here is anxiety. It is passing through." And slowly, over time, the storms became less frequent and less intense. They didn't disappear entirely. But they no longer controlled her. She had discovered that she was not the storm. She was the mountain. If this teaching resonates with you, I invite you to subscribe to Monk's Temple. This is a simple way to continue receiving these gentle reminders in your daily life. By subscribing, you create a commitment to your own growth, a small promise to keep showing up for yourself. Just click the button below. It helps us continue to share these teachings with everyone who needs them. There is a teaching in Buddhism that is often misunderstood. It is the teaching of impermanence. When we hear that everything is impermanent, that nothing lasts forever, it can sound depressing at first. It can sound like a reminder that everything we love will eventually fade, that every happy moment will eventually end, that even we ourselves will not last forever. And yes, this is true. But this is only one side of the truth. The other side, the side that liberates us, is this: your pain is also impermanent. Your problems are also impermanent. The troubles you face today are also subject to this same law of change. They will not last forever. They cannot last forever. They are arising right now, but they are also passing away, moment by moment, whether you notice it or not. Think about a time 5 years ago when you were absolutely devastated about something. Maybe it was a breakup. Maybe it was a job loss. Maybe it was a deep betrayal by someone you trusted. At that moment, the pain felt permanent. It felt like you would never recover, never feel happy again, never trust again. But here you are today. You are still here. And that pain, if you even remember it, has transformed. It may still be there as a memory, but it no longer has the same power over you. The sharp edges have worn smooth. The intensity has faded. This is not because you are stronger now, though you may be. This is simply because everything changes. The river of time flows, and nothing can stop it. The Buddha spoke of this truth constantly. He said that all conditioned things, all things that arise due to causes and conditions, are impermanent. They arise, they abide for a while, and then they cease. This is not a pessimistic view of life. It is simply an accurate one. And when we truly understand this, when we internalize it not just as an idea but as a living truth, it changes everything. We stop clinging so desperately to the good moments, knowing they will pass, which allows us to enjoy them more fully while they are here. And we stop resisting the difficult moments so fiercely, knowing they will also pass, which allows us to move through them with more grace and less suffering. I want to share another story with you, this time about a man named James. James was a high school teacher. He had been teaching for nearly 20 years, and he loved his work. He loved watching young minds wake up to the world of ideas. He loved the moment when a struggling student would finally understand something difficult. He loved the rhythm of the school year, the beginning of fall, the energy of spring. Teaching was not just his job. It was his identity. It was who he was. Then came the budget cuts. The school district needed to reduce staff, and James, despite his years of experience and dedication, was let go. Seniority rules had changed. Contracts were being reinterpreted. It was political and impersonal, but the result was the same. After 2 decades, James was no longer a teacher. He fell into a deep darkness. He would wake up in the morning and have nowhere to go. He would see his former colleagues posting pictures of their classrooms, their students, their lesson plans, and he would feel a physical ache in his chest. He felt erased. He felt like his life had lost its meaning. He applied for other teaching positions, but the market was crowded. Month after month passed with no offers. The pain felt permanent. He would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, thinking, "This is my life now. This is who I have become. A person with no purpose." One afternoon, his daughter asked him to help her with a school project. She was studying local history and needed to interview someone who had lived in the town for a long time. James agreed, mostly just to have something to do. They went to the local historical society, and he helped her sort through old photographs and documents. As they worked together, James found himself explaining things to his daughter. He pointed out the old train station, now converted into a restaurant. He told her about the mill that used to operate by the river, long before she was born. He showed her how to read the old handwriting in the documents, how to piece together a story from fragments. His daughter looked at him and said, "Dad, you're really good at this. You should teach history here or something." It was a simple comment from a child, but something shifted in James. He started volunteering at the historical society. Then he started giving occasional talks to small groups. Then he developed a walking tour of the town's historic sites. People loved it. They loved his knowledge, his enthusiasm, his ability to make the past come alive. Within 2 years, James had built a new career. He wasn't a classroom teacher anymore, but he was still teaching. He was leading workshops, giving lectures, writing a small book about the town's history. The pain of losing his job had not been permanent. It had been a doorway. He could not see it at the time because he was standing so close to it. But looking back, he could see that the ending of one thing had been the beginning of another. The river had flowed on, and he had flowed with it. This is the truth of impermanence. It is not always comfortable. It asks us to let go of what we are clinging to. But it also promises us that no matter how dark the moment, it will not last forever. The sun always rises again. There is something we must understand about the stories we tell ourselves. Every human being lives inside a narrative. We are constantly constructing stories about who we are, where we came from, where we are going. These stories give our lives coherence and meaning. But they can also become prisons. When we identify too strongly with our stories, we forget that they are just stories. We forget that we are the storyteller, not just the character. Think about the story you tell yourself about your life right now. Maybe it is a story of struggle. Maybe it is a story of not being good enough, of always falling short, of never quite getting there. Maybe it is a story of being a victim, of being treated unfairly by life or by others. These stories feel true. They feel like objective facts about reality. But if you look closely, you will see that they are interpretations. They are the meaning you have attached to events, not the events themselves. Buddhism teaches us that the mind is not a passive receiver of reality. The mind is an active creator. It takes the raw data of experience and weaves it into a narrative. This is not inherently a problem. The problem arises when we forget that we are doing this. We become fused with our stories. We believe them absolutely. And then we suffer because our stories are often stories of limitation, of lack, of unworthiness. The Buddha encouraged his followers to examine their minds with the same careful attention that a scientist might bring to an experiment. Observe the thoughts. Notice how they arise. Notice how they linger. Notice how they pass away. And most importantly, notice that you are not your thoughts. You are the one watching them. This is the beginning of freedom. I want to share a story about a woman named Carmen who learned this lesson in a very unexpected way. Carmen was a musician. She had played the cello since she was a child, and it was the great love of her life. She had studied at prestigious conservatories. She had performed in small halls and large concert venues. Music was not just what she did. It was how she understood herself. Then, in her early 40s, she developed a condition in her hands. The nerves began to misfire. Her fingers would cramp and tremble, especially when she was trying to play. She saw specialists. She tried treatments. Nothing worked. Within 2 years, she could no longer perform. She could barely hold the bow. Carmen fell into a despair that was difficult to describe. It was not just grief over losing an activity she loved. It was a crisis of identity. If she was not a cellist, who was she? The story she had told herself her entire life had been ripped apart. She stopped leaving her apartment. She stopped answering calls from friends. She would sit for hours staring at her cello case, unable to open it, unable to look away. One evening, her niece came to visit. She was a teenager, and she was working on a school project about sound. She asked Carmen to help her understand how sound works. Carmen, reluctant at first, began to explain. She talked about vibrations, about frequencies, about how sound waves travel through the air and are transformed by the ear into something the brain can understand. As she spoke, something stirred in her. She went to her bookshelf and pulled out books on acoustics she had not opened in years. She showed her niece diagrams and explained concepts. For those few hours, she was not a cellist who could no longer play. She was someone who understood something beautiful and was sharing it. After that night, Carmen began to research the science of sound more deeply. She started writing articles. She connected with universities and research labs. She became a consultant for companies designing concert halls and recording studios. Her understanding of music, gained through decades of playing, gave her insights that pure scientists did not have. And her scientific studies gave her a new language for the thing she loved. Years later, Carmen was invited to give a lecture at a major university. The title of her talk was, "The Sound of Silence, What We Hear When the Music Stops." She stood at the podium and looked out at the audience. She told them about losing her ability to play. She told them about the despair. And then she told them about the discovery that followed. She said, "I thought my story was over. I thought I had become nothing. But I had only become something else. The story was still being written. I just could not see the next page." This is the truth about our stories. They are never finished. No matter how final a chapter may seem, there is always another page waiting to be turned. The question is not whether your current story is painful or difficult. The question is whether you are willing to keep reading, to keep discovering what comes next. The Buddha taught that clinging to any fixed view of ourselves is a source of suffering. When we say, "I am this," or "I am that," we are building a cage around ourselves. But when we open to the possibility that we are always becoming, always changing, always growing, then we are free. Not free from difficulty, but free from the prison of a fixed identity. Carmen could have stayed in her apartment, staring at her cello case, trapped in the story of who she used to be. Instead, she allowed a new story to emerge. And in doing so, she discovered that she was far more than she had ever imagined. Your story is not finished either. Whatever you are going through right now, whatever loss or disappointment or failure you are carrying, it is just a chapter. It is not the whole book. And the author is still writing. Let us continue our time together. There is a paradox at the heart of human experience that is worth examining. The paradox is this: the more we run from our pain, the more it pursues us. The more we try to escape our difficult emotions, the more firmly they attach themselves to us. It is like trying to outrun your own shadow. No matter how fast you go, no matter how far you travel, the shadow stays right there with you. The only way to escape a shadow is to step into the light. And the only way to escape emotional pain is to turn toward it, to investigate it, to understand it. This is not what we are taught. We are taught to distract ourselves. We are taught to consume something, to scroll through something, to numb ourselves with something. The entire modern world is built around the promise of escape. Escape from boredom, escape from discomfort, escape from the present moment. But the Buddha offered a different path. He offered the path of turning toward. He taught that if we want to be free from suffering, we must understand suffering. We must look directly at it, with curiosity and without judgment. We must ask, what is this? How does it feel? What does it want? What happens if I just stay with it for a moment instead of running away? Psychologists today call this approach exposure therapy or acceptance and commitment therapy. They have discovered that when people stop avoiding their fears and instead approach them gradually and mindfully, the fears lose their power. The same principle applies to all difficult emotions. Grief, anger, shame, despair. They are all like wild animals. If you run from them, they will chase you. If you stand still and face them calmly, they will eventually lose interest and wander away. I want to share a story about a man named Andre who discovered this truth in his own life. Andre was a firefighter. For 20 years, he had run into burning buildings while everyone else ran out. He had seen things that most people cannot imagine. He had pulled people from cars before they exploded. He had held children as they took their last breaths. He had lost colleagues, friends, people he loved. And for 20 years, he had done what he was trained to do. He had compartmentalized. He had pushed the feelings down. He had focused on the next call, the next emergency, the next thing that needed to be done. Then he retired. And the feelings that he had been pushing down for 2 decades began to rise up. They came at night mostly. He would wake up drenched in sweat, his heart pounding, images from long ago flashing through his mind. During the day, he would feel a heavy weight on his chest, a constant low-grade dread that never lifted. He became irritable, withdrawn. His wife did not know how to reach him. His children tiptoed around him. Andre, who had been a hero to so many, felt like he was drowning. He tried to escape. He drank more than he should have. He spent hours watching television, trying to shut off his brain. He took long drives alone, hoping to outrun the feelings. Nothing worked. The feelings were always there, waiting for him when he got home. Finally, his wife convinced him to see a therapist. The therapist did something unexpected. She did not try to fix him. She did not give him techniques to get rid of the feelings. She simply asked him to describe them. To sit with them. To notice where they lived in his body. To observe what happened when he just let them be there without trying to push them away. At first, Andre thought this was ridiculous. He had spent his entire career running toward danger. Sitting still and feeling things felt like the opposite of everything he knew. But he was desperate, so he tried. He would close his eyes and notice the tightness in his chest. He would notice the images that came. He would notice the urge to get up, to move, to do something. And slowly, something began to shift. The feelings did not disappear, but they became less overwhelming. He could observe them instead of being consumed by them. He could say to himself, "Here is grief. Here is fear. They are here right now, but they are not all of me." Over time, Andre began to heal. Not because he escaped his pain, but because he finally stopped running from it. He started a support group for other retired first responders. He would tell them, "You cannot outrun what you carry. The only way through is through. The only way out is in." The Buddha taught that suffering has a cause. And because it has a cause, it can be understood. And because it can be understood, it can be ended. But the ending does not come from avoidance. It comes from investigation. It comes from the courageous act of turning toward what we most want to turn away from. When you do this, you discover something remarkable. The pain you have been running from is not as big as you thought. It is not as solid as you thought. When you look closely at it, you see that it is just energy, just sensation, just a collection of thoughts and feelings that arise and pass away on their own. You do not need to fight them. You just need to stop running. Whatever you are facing today, whatever you have been trying to escape, consider the possibility of turning toward it. Not with judgment, not with resistance, but with gentle curiosity. What would happen if you just sat with it for a moment? What would happen if you stopped running? You might discover that you are stronger than you think. You might discover that the thing you fear most is not a monster but a shadow. And when you step into the light, the shadow disappears. There is a quality of mind that is perhaps more valuable than any other when you are going through difficult times. That quality is patience. Patience is not passive. It is not simply waiting around for things to get better. Patience is an active, dynamic state of mind. It is the willingness to be with what is, without demanding that it be different right now. It is the capacity to trust the process, even when you cannot see where the process is leading. We live in a world that has forgotten patience. Everything is instant. Food arrives at our door in minutes. Messages reach the other side of the planet in seconds. We can stream any movie, any song, any piece of information whenever we want. This instant world has shaped our brains. We have become addicted to immediacy. We want results now. We want healing now. We want success now. And when things do not happen instantly, we become anxious, frustrated, and discouraged. We think something is wrong. We think we are failing. But real life does not work this way. Real growth takes time. Real healing takes time. Real success takes time. A seed does not become a tree overnight. It takes years of sun and rain, of seasons passing, of slow, invisible growth beneath the surface. You cannot see the roots spreading, but they are spreading. You cannot see the trunk thickening, but it is thickening. And then one day, there is a tree. But the tree did not appear suddenly. It was always becoming, always growing, always on its way. The Buddha understood this deeply. He taught that the path to liberation is a gradual one. It is not a sudden jump. It is not a quick fix. It is a process of training the mind, of cultivating wholesome qualities, of letting go of unwholesome ones. This takes time. It takes patience. It takes the willingness to show up day after day, even when you cannot see immediate progress. I want to share a story about a young woman named Layla who learned the value of patience in a way she never expected. Layla was a writer. She had dreamed of writing a novel since she was a girl. She had filled notebooks with stories, with character sketches, with dialogue fragments. After college, she dedicated herself fully to the project. She woke up early every morning and wrote for 3 hours before going to her part-time job. She attended writing workshops. She joined a critique group. She did everything she was supposed to do. After 2 years, she had a completed manuscript. She was thrilled. She sent it to literary agents, imagining the calls that would come, the offers, the publication deal. Then she waited. And waited. Rejections began to arrive. Some were form letters. Some were slightly more personal but still rejections. After 6 months of querying, she had received nothing but no. She revised the manuscript and tried again. More rejections. She felt like she was hitting her head against a wall. The dream that had sustained her for so long began to feel like a cruel joke. Layla was ready to quit. She told herself that she was not good enough, that she had wasted years of her life, that she should just give up and find something practical to do. But something stopped her. She remembered something an old teacher had once told her. The difference between a writer and someone who wants to be a writer is that the writer keeps writing. So she kept writing. Not because she believed it would lead anywhere. Just because it was what she did. She started a new novel. A completely different story. She wrote without expectations, without looking over her shoulder, without checking for agents or publishers. She wrote because the writing itself was the point. Months passed. Then a year. Then 2 years. She finished the second novel. This time, instead of immediately querying, she put it in a drawer and started a third. Something had shifted in her. The desperate need for results had faded. The writing had become its own reward. When she finally did begin to query the second novel, she was in a different place mentally. The rejections still came, but they did not devastate her the way they once had. She had learned patience. She had learned that the work itself was valuable, regardless of the outcome. Then one day, an agent reached out. Not in response to her query, but because they had read a short story she had published in a small literary magazine. They asked if she had a novel. She did. She had 2. The agent took her on. The novel sold to a publisher. It was not an instant bestseller. It did not make her famous or rich. But it was published. People read it. Some of them wrote to her, saying that her words had touched them, had helped them, had meant something to them. And Layla understood that none of this would have happened if she had quit. None of this would have happened if she had not learned to be patient, to trust the process, to keep going even when she could not see the destination. Patience is not easy. In the middle of struggle, it can feel impossible. But patience is not about blind faith. It is about understanding the nature of things. It is about knowing that the sun rises in its own time, that the seasons turn in their own time, that your life unfolds in its own time. You cannot rush a river. You cannot hurry the dawn. You can only be present for the unfolding. Whatever you are working toward, whatever you are waiting for, try to cultivate patience. Not the patience of resignation, but the patience of trust. Trust that what is growing beneath the surface is real. Trust that the seeds you are planting will bear fruit in their own season. Trust that you are exactly where you need to be, even if you cannot see why. And keep going. One step at a time. One day at a time. The way will open. There is a teaching in Buddhism that is often translated as right effort. It is one of the elements of the Noble Eightfold Path, the Buddha's practical guide to ending suffering. Right effort is not about straining or pushing or forcing yourself to be different. It is about finding the middle way between indulgence and repression. It is about applying just enough energy to move in the direction of healing and growth, without burning yourself out or creating more suffering through striving. This is a delicate balance. Many of us, when we encounter difficulty, swing to one extreme or the other. Either we give up entirely, deciding that nothing matters and there is no point in trying. Or we push too hard, demanding that we fix ourselves immediately, that we overcome our problems through sheer force of will. Both approaches lead to more suffering. The first leads to stagnation and despair. The second leads to exhaustion and self-criticism. Right effort asks us to find a different way. It asks us to apply steady, consistent, gentle effort. The kind of effort a gardener applies to tending a garden. The gardener does not shout at the plants to grow faster. The gardener does not pull on the stems to make them taller. The gardener simply provides the right conditions: water, sunlight, good soil, protection from pests. And then the gardener waits, trusting that the plants will grow in their own time. I want to share a story about a man named Marcus who learned about right effort through a most unlikely teacher. Marcus was a corporate lawyer. He was successful by any external measure. He had a corner office, a six-figure salary, a beautiful home, a luxury car. But inside, he was miserable. He felt empty. He felt like he was running on a treadmill that never stopped. He worked 80 hours a week, slept poorly, and had not taken a real vacation in years. His relationships were strained. His health was declining. He knew something had to change, but he did not know how. He tried to fix himself the same way he fixed problems at work, with sheer force of will. He read self-help books and made elaborate plans. He set ambitious goals for exercise, meditation, and time with family. He scheduled every minute of his day, determined to optimize his life into happiness. For a few weeks, it seemed to work. He felt productive, in control. But then the old patterns would creep back. He would miss a meditation session, then feel guilty. He would work late once, then twice, then every night. The plans would collapse, and he would feel like a failure. So he would make new plans, even more ambitious, even more rigid. And the cycle would repeat. One weekend, Marcus visited his grandmother. She was in her 90s, living in a small cottage in the countryside. She had a garden, as she had always had, and she spent her days tending it. Marcus sat with her on the porch, watching her move slowly among the plants. She did not seem rushed. She did not seem like she was trying to achieve anything. She just moved from plant to plant, checking, watering, pruning, with a quiet contentment. Marcus asked her, "Grandma, how do you make it all look so easy? I try so hard to fix my life, and I just end up more exhausted." His grandmother smiled. She picked up a small potted plant that was sitting nearby. It was a succulent, thick-leaved and healthy. She held it out to Marcus. "See this plant? When I first got it, it was tiny. Barely alive. I could have put it in the biggest pot, given it the richest soil, watered it every hour. But that would have killed it. It needed time. It needed the right conditions, but it also needed to grow at its own pace. You cannot force a plant to grow. You can only create the conditions and let it do the rest." She put the plant down and looked at her grandson. "You are trying to force yourself to grow. You are pulling on the stem, demanding that the flower appear now. But that is not how growth works. You need to create the conditions. Rest. Good food. Time with people you love. Work that matters. And then you need to let go. Let yourself grow at your own pace. Trust that you are becoming what you need to become, even when you cannot see it. Marcus sat with his grandmother's words for a long time. He began to see his struggle differently. He was not failing because his ambitious plans collapsed. He was failing because his plans were never designed for a human being. They were designed for a machine. And he was not a machine. He was a living thing, like the plants in his grandmother's garden. He went home and made one small change. He stopped trying to fix everything at once. He stopped demanding immediate transformation. He simply created one small condition for his well-being each day. A walk in the morning. A call to a friend. An hour of reading before bed. Nothing dramatic. Nothing forced. Just small, consistent acts of care. Over months, these small acts accumulated. The changes were not dramatic, but they were real. He slept better. He felt calmer. He began to enjoy his work again, not because it had changed, but because his relationship to it had changed. Right effort is not about pushing harder. It is about showing up, consistently and gently, and trusting the process. It is about creating conditions for growth and then letting growth happen in its own time. Whatever you are working through, whatever you are trying to heal, remember this: you are not a machine to be fixed. You are a living thing to be nurtured. Be patient with yourself. Be gentle with yourself. And keep showing up, one small step at a time. There is a misunderstanding that many people carry about the spiritual path. The misunderstanding is that spiritual practice is supposed to make you feel good all the time. That if you meditate enough, if you practice enough, you will eventually reach a state of permanent happiness where difficulties no longer touch you. This is not what the Buddha taught. What the Buddha taught was not the elimination of difficulty, but the end of suffering. And these are two very different things. Difficulty is part of life. Bodies get sick. Loved ones die. Plans fail. Expectations are disappointed. This is not a punishment. This is simply the nature of existence. The Buddha did not promise to make the waves go away. He promised to teach you how to surf. The end of suffering does not mean that nothing painful ever happens to you again. It means that painful things can happen without destroying you. It means you can experience loss, disappointment, failure, and grief without being defined by them. It means you can feel the full range of human emotions and still know, at your core, that you are okay. That you are whole. That you are enough. I want to share a story about a woman named Nora who discovered this kind of peace. Nora was a hospice nurse. She had spent her entire career caring for people who were dying. She had sat beside hundreds of people in their final days. People often asked her how she could work with death every day and not be depressed. How could she witness so much suffering and still find meaning? Nora would say that she had learned something from the dying that the living rarely understand. At the end of life, people do not talk about their achievements or their possessions. They do not wish they had worked more hours or made more money. They talk about love. They talk about moments of connection. They talk about the small, simple things that brought them joy. A sunset. A cup of tea with a friend. The sound of rain on the roof. One of Nora's patients was an elderly man named George. George had been a successful businessman. He had built a company from nothing and sold it for millions. He had traveled the world, owned beautiful homes, collected art and cars. Now he was in a small hospice room, his body failing, his wealth meaningless. Nora spent many hours with him. At first, he was angry. Angry at his body for betraying him. Angry at fate. He would rail against his situation, unable to accept what was happening. But as the days passed, something shifted in George. The anger began to fade. In its place, something else emerged. A quiet acceptance. A willingness to simply be where he was, without fighting it anymore. One afternoon, he said to Nora, "You know, I spent my whole life trying to get somewhere. I thought if I could just get to the next goal, then I would finally be happy. But I never got there. There was always another thing to chase. And now I'm here, and I realize I was already there. I was already where I needed to be. I just didn't know it." Nora held his hand and said nothing. George had discovered something that no amount of money could give him. He had discovered peace. Not the peace of having everything he wanted, but the peace of wanting nothing more than what he had. The peace of being fully present in this one moment. When George died a few days later, Nora was with him. She later said that his face, in death, held an expression of profound calm. The struggle was over. What remained was simply peace. Nora carried this teaching with her. She continued her work, continued witnessing death and suffering. But she also carried something else. She carried the understanding that peace is possible, even in the midst of difficulty. Not because the difficulty goes away, but because you stop fighting it. You stop demanding that life be different than it is. You open to what is, and in that opening, you find something that was always there. A stillness beneath the chaos. A wholeness beneath the brokenness. This is what the Buddha taught. Not the elimination of difficulty, but the discovery of a peace that is deeper than any difficulty. A peace that is your true nature. A peace that is always available, always present, always waiting for you to stop running long enough to notice. Whatever you are going through right now, whatever pain or struggle you are carrying, know that this peace is available to you. Not at the end of your struggles. Not after you fix everything. Right now, in this very moment, beneath all the noise and chaos, there is a stillness. Beneath all the fear and doubt, there is a knowing. Beneath all the striving, there is a wholeness. You do not need to earn it. You only need to stop, to breathe, and to remember that it was always there. Waiting for you to come home. There is a quality of heart that is often overlooked in discussions about personal growth. That quality is compassion. Not compassion for others, though that is important. But compassion for yourself. Self-compassion. The willingness to meet your own pain with kindness instead of criticism. The ability to hold your own struggles with the same gentle care you would offer a dear friend who was suffering. Many of us have never learned to do this. We have learned the opposite. We have learned to be harsh with ourselves. When we make a mistake, we criticize. When we fall short, we judge. When we struggle, we tell ourselves that we should be stronger, should be better, should be further along than we are. This inner critic speaks in a voice that is often cruel, often relentless. And we believe this voice. We think it is telling us the truth. We think that if we are not hard on ourselves, we will never improve, never grow, never become who we are supposed to be. But the Buddha taught a different way. He taught that kindness is not weakness. That gentleness is not laziness. That the path to transformation is paved not with self-criticism but with self-compassion. When you are kind to yourself, you create the conditions for real change. When you are gentle with yourself, you build the trust and safety that allow you to look honestly at your own mind. Without this kindness, the mind remains defended, closed, afraid to see itself clearly. I want to share a story about a man named Carlos who discovered the power of self-compassion. Carlos was a perfectionist. He always had been. As a child, he brought home straight A's and felt ashamed if one was an A-. As a young adult, he pushed himself relentlessly in his career, working long hours, taking on extra projects, never allowing himself to rest. He was successful by any external measure. He was promoted quickly, earned respect from colleagues, built a comfortable life. But inside, he was exhausted. Inside, he was never enough. The inner critic in Carlos was loud and constant. It pointed out every mistake, every imperfection, every moment when he could have done better. It compared him to others and always found him wanting. It told him that if he ever relaxed, ever slowed down, ever let his guard down, everything would fall apart. Carlos believed this voice completely. He thought it was the voice of ambition, of drive, of success. He did not recognize it for what it was, a source of constant suffering. Then Carlos's body forced him to stop. He developed a chronic health condition that left him fatigued and in pain. He could not work 80 hours anymore. He could barely work 40. He could not push through. He could not outrun. He had to rest. And in that rest, with the striving temporarily silenced, he heard something new. Not the voice of the critic, but a quieter voice underneath. A voice that said, "You are tired. You have been carrying so much for so long. It is okay to rest. It is okay to be exactly where you are." At first, Carlos did not trust this voice. It felt foreign, almost dangerous. He worried that if he listened to it, he would lose everything he had worked for. But he was too tired to fight anymore. So he just listened. He let the gentle voice speak. And slowly, something began to shift. Carlos started to notice how he talked to himself. He started to notice the harshness, the constant criticism. And he started to experiment with something new. When he made a mistake, instead of saying, "You are such an idiot," he tried saying, "It's okay. Everyone makes mistakes." When he felt overwhelmed, instead of saying, "You should be able to handle this," he tried saying, "This is really hard right now. It makes sense that you feel overwhelmed." It felt strange at first, like learning a new language. But over time, it became more natural. What Carlos discovered was that self-compassion did not make him lazy or complacent. It made him more resilient. When he was kind to himself, he recovered from setbacks faster. He had more energy, not less, because he was not wasting energy on self-criticism. He could see his own weaknesses more clearly because he was not afraid to look at them. He could grow because he had created a safe space for growth. The Buddha taught that loving kindness, or metta, is one of the most important qualities we can cultivate. And this loving kindness must begin with ourselves. You cannot give to others what you do not have for yourself. If you want to be kind to the world, you must first learn to be kind to your own heart. If you want to forgive others, you must first learn to forgive yourself. If you want to offer peace to those around you, you must first find peace within your own mind. Whatever you are struggling with today, whatever mistakes you have made, whatever ways you feel you have fallen short, I invite you to offer yourself some kindness. Just for a moment. Put your hand on your heart if that feels right. Take a breath. And say to yourself, this is hard. And I am doing the best I can. You are. You really are. You have been carrying so much for so long. It is okay to rest. It is okay to be gentle with yourself. It is okay to be exactly where you are. Let us come now to the close of our time together. We have covered much ground on this journey. We have spoken about the nature of mind, about impermanence, about the stories we tell ourselves, about patience, about right effort, about peace that exists even in difficulty, about self-compassion. These are not just ideas to be understood. They are practices to be lived. They are invitations to show up for your life in a different way. The Buddha's final words, spoken as he lay dying at the age of 80, were these: all conditioned things are impermanent. Work out your salvation with diligence. He was not telling his followers to depend on him. He was not telling them to look outside themselves for salvation. He was pointing them back to their own minds, their own hearts, their own practice. He was saying that the path is yours to walk. No one can walk it for you. But the teachings, the community, the wisdom of those who have gone before, these are your companions along the way. As you leave this space and return to your daily life, I invite you to carry something with you. Carry the understanding that whatever you are facing right now is not permanent. It will change. It must change. That is its nature. Carry the understanding that you are not your thoughts, not your feelings, not your problems. You are the awareness that holds all of these things. You are the sky, not the weather. Carry the understanding that your story is not finished. No matter how dark this chapter may seem, there are more pages to be written. And you are the author. I want to leave you with one final story. There was once a monk who lived simply in a small hut at the edge of a forest. He had few possessions and few visitors. He spent his days in meditation, in walking, in quiet contemplation. One day, a young man came to see him. The young man was troubled, burdened by worries, unsure of his path. He asked the monk, "How can I find peace? I have tried so many things, but peace always eludes me." The monk did not answer immediately. He simply sat with the young man in silence for a long moment. Then he picked up a cup that was sitting beside him. He held it out and said, "This cup is already broken." The young man was confused. "But it's not broken," he said. "It's perfectly fine." The monk smiled. "I know it looks fine now. But I have already seen it broken. I have already accepted that one day it will fall, or be knocked over, or simply wear out with age. Because I have already accepted its breaking, I can appreciate it fully while it is still whole. I can enjoy its beauty, its usefulness, its presence, without clinging to it. I can hold it lightly. And because I hold it lightly, I am at peace with it, whether it is here or gone. The young man sat with this for a while. Then he understood. The monk was not talking about the cup. He was talking about everything. About life itself. About all the people and things we love. They are all already broken. They will all eventually change, fade, end. When we can accept this fully, not as a depressing thought but as a simple truth, then we are free. Free to love without clinging. Free to live without grasping. Free to be fully present in this moment, the only moment that ever really exists. So here you are. In this moment. Alive. Breathing. Capable of feeling, of thinking, of choosing. Whatever you are carrying, you can put it down for a moment and just be here. Whatever you are chasing, you can stop for a moment and just be here. Whatever you are fearing, you can release it for a moment and just be here. This moment is enough. You are enough. Thank you for being here at Monk's Temple. Thank you for walking this path with me. May you be happy. May you be peaceful. May you be free from suffering. May you walk through your life with courage, with kindness, and with the deep knowing that you are exactly where you need to be.